At some point in our lives, most of us will experience a traumatic event that will change us forever. An encounter that will leave our body gasping for air and our soul grasping for meaning. My guests have found the hope God gives in crisis. Ricky Tejada serves with his wife Sid, pastors of one of the 4 Covenant Church campuses in Dallas-Fort Worth. In Texas, everything is big, and these guys have massive congregation, radio ministry, internet, on and on it goes, but a story to tell. And Sid, I'm going to ask for your forgiveness because I want to get to the first aspect of this amazing book, My Breaking Point, God's Turning Point. Experience God's amazing power to restore. I did something I don't ever do, Ricky. I did this at the back of the book, and I read, in a surprising place, your starting place. Your 3 objectives in college: get an education, sleep with lots of girls, party lots, and party some more. Your model was your oldest brother.
Yes, it was, and thank you, Moira, for having me on the program today, having us on the program. It was an amazing journey because my oldest brother was always my idol. This guy was just a wonderful big brother. He was very protective. He was very smart. He marched to his own drum beat, and because of that, then I wanted to follow in his footsteps. But when I got to college, he was living my objectives. And what I realized is 3 days into this university experience, I said, I really don't want to live all of those objectives. So I tapered down my objectives. I wanted to still get the education. I wouldn't sleep with a lot of girls. I'd just sleep with a few. And then I would party and party some more.
What brought that to a head?
Well, it happened the first dance on campus. I went to our student union and they were having the dance. And I was getting ready to implement objective number 2. I had targeted a young lady and had invited her to come on the dance floor. And right in the middle of the dancing and the lights strobing, I heard a question. It wasn't an audible question, but it was a deeply intense question. And the question was this: what are you doing here? It was so intense, I stopped dancing, I looked around the room, and I walked out of the dance. And as I walked to the dormitory, I looked up to heaven and I uttered these words: God, I don't know if you're real. My mom and dad say that you are. I've grown up in church all of my life. I'm really not sure. If you're real, make yourself known, because if you don't, I have 3 objectives that I'm going to fulfill. And I'm telling you, that prayer in sincerity, God began to answer that over the course of the next 2 weeks, changed everything.
Wonderful. You connected with a guy you were told to avoid, Christian. And that's a great part of the story. And that's at the very back. So let's get to what the main event is, but what a starting place. You would never have survived what you've been through if you hadn't made that initial decision to trust God. Take us to December 17th, 1996. We have to fast track, and that's a day that could have derailed your faith completely.
Well, December 17th is a day that I will never forget. It is a day that marked the greatest pain of my life. At that moment, I had left my secular job as well as my wife, Deborah. We had both served in the corporate environment. We then were brought on staff at our church that was growing very rapidly. I was responsible for small group ministry. She was responsible for member services and member care. And about 5 o'clock that evening, our pastor walked into her office, and I was there. We were planning for a meeting for later on that evening, and he said, "We have been in an intense meeting today, and we feel like the Lord has led us to establish you all and ordain you all as pastors in the new year." Well, you can only imagine how excited we were and just elated that we are finally, after all of these years of living and serving the Lord, living for and serving the Lord, and working in our church. We're going to be made pastors. Well, we were on our way home after the meeting about 10 o'clock, and I asked Deborah this one question. Our friends had made gumbo. We were born and raised in Louisiana, so you never pass up an opportunity for good gumbo. And I asked her this question: do you want to go and get some gumbo from Pat and Mike's house? And her last words to me were, I just want to go home. And then the next thing I heard was this incredible crashing sound. Of course, it was dark. And the next thing I realized that we had been in an accident.
We have a picture of Deborah, just to put a face to 10 years of your life. Actually, you were married 10 years. You dated first year of college, right?
Yes, we were together for 15 years total.
When you got the news in the hospital, I was so struck with your statement right in the moment. You said, if you think this is going to make me turn my back on God, you're in for a surprise. Watch me. I'm going to serve him with even greater fervency. You, Satan, the thief, will not win.
Yes, I said that because I realized, and I'm not certain how in the moment I could do that, except for the fact that I believe that when we are squeezed, when we come under intense pressure, what's in us is what comes out. It's like a tube of toothpaste. When you squeeze it, what's in it comes out. And I said that because I realized that God is not the author of death. Jesus himself said this, that Satan comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So I recognized in that moment that this is not God's doing. He is not the author of this type of destruction. And so I wanted to make certain that there were declarations. There were so many things going through my mind at the time. I didn't know whether God was rejecting me. I didn't know why we were in this situation after having received the great news 7 hours earlier. There was lots of confusion, but the one thing I was certain of, that as I looked around that room, there was nobody there who could help me. I knew only God could, and I would turn to him in that moment.
I just want to make the point, because you do a lot of things that show your confidence in God to get through something you didn't think initially you could survive. That's how devastating the loss was and how great the grief. Sid, you had met this man.
I had met him in college, and I thought that he was a zealot because he walked around college with his Bible, and he was always preaching and ministering to people. So I grew up in church, but I just thought, this guy is pretty serious about this.
Tell us how God brought you into the darkness of, Ricky's experience.
Well, I was
grief.
busy working in the corporate environment and serving faithfully in my church, and I was believing God for the right man that he would bring into my life. And I didn't want to choose my husband. I wanted the Lord to choose him. And so just in the midst of that, I worked some years, a little over 10 years. And right after I just gotten this big promotion that I had been believing God for, and a big raise, the timing of God is so interesting. I had to make a decision to walk away from everything, and because I was believing that Ricky was the man that God had for me. So I walked away from that.
Now, you had a matchmaker in this story, and you weren't thankful for him.
Yes, the matchmaker in the story was Keith Kraft. Keith was a friend of ours, and at that moment he was a traveling evangelist. He was at Sid's church. She was leading worship that particular day when he was ministering the word. And after the service, Sid just casually asked him, I understand you go to Covenant. Do you know Ricky Tejada?
Because I'd heard about the loss since we went to the same university.
Right. Yeah. And so he said to her, I'm going to have him call you. Well, a week later, he comes back to church. He mentions Sid's name, and he says, I told her you're going to call her. And I was really, really upset with him.
Well, and this was after 14 days of fasting.
Yes.
You hadn't eaten any food. You were waiting on God. He sends the answer, and you're irritated. But it all worked out because, well, here's the evidence here. Your first date was October 11th. You were married Easter weekend, April 11th.
6 months to the day.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I want to bring up 4 points because the cute stuff in this story, well, it needed a book. But I think this will be helpful for people who are stuck in loss and grief. Truths to embrace when you're in that hard place. Help us through these. Well, trust God. That's something you didn't stop doing.
I did not stop doing, but let me tell you, I had to have my trust in Him restored. And it wasn't based upon anything that I felt. I had to, in spite of how I felt, remind myself of what He had promised. One of the things that I felt during that season was that He didn't love me. At least the voice in my head was saying He doesn't love you and He doesn't care for you and He would not have allowed this to happen. But I would look in the mirror every morning. I would say, no matter how you're feeling, you must trust God.
Okay, we're just going to have to do these very quickly, unfortunately. Never give up. The keep moving forward, that's key. But you'll quickly make the exchange with God. That's a big part of the book, where you had to kind of lay it all down, all your expectations.
I had to give God my pain. It's about being real with where you are. And so I would exchange my anger for His love. I would exchange my confusion for His clarity. I would exchange my sorrow for His joy.
And His plan, so all-inclusive, the all things working together. Sid, Deborah's best friends are your best friends today.
They are my best friends. And that was just the hand of God, that He could take a situation like that. And what was so amazing is God would have people say, you know, it's like she's always been here. Deborah's friends, the pastors at the church, even Ricky's family, everybody who adored Deborah, the Lord just gave me favor because I was trusting Him to work out the whole situation. And they would say, without hearing each other, it's like she's always been here, and only God can do that.
Wow, I love this quote from the book. Whatever you go through, if you will grow through it, you will create a breakthrough. God isn't finished with your life. I love Gordon Banks, former NFL player with the Dallas Cowboys, now a senior pastor in Seattle, Washington. He says, this book will strengthen you, encourage you, and simply put, make you feel like you can win again. Thank you so much for writing it, Ricky. Said you had to help.
I had to.
Your chapters are in here, available at our e-store. I hope you're encouraged today.